You build a statue in your mind. You take the person you desire, the crush, the mentor, the impossible love, and you cover them in gold. You analyze their texts like scripture. You interpret their silence as divine mystery. You look at them and you see perfection. You see a prize that is too good for you. You think this is love. You think this is respect. But actually, it is an act of self-sabotage. There is a brutally simple law of physics that applies to relationships. Distance is required for perspective. To look up to someone, you must place yourself beneath them. You have to create a vertical gap between your reality and theirs. When you put someone on a pedestal, you are not honoring them. You are dehumanizing them. You are turning a flesh and blood human being into a marble statue. And here's the tragedy. Statues are made to be looked at, not held. You cannot hold the hand of someone if you are always on your knees. As long as you view them as a prize to be won, you remain a contestant, hoping to get lucky. And high-value people do not fall in love with fans. They fall in love with equals. Today, we are going to grab a sledgehammer. We are going to smash the altar you have built in your mind. We are going to bring them down from the clouds and put them back on the ground, right where they belong, eye to eye, and within your reach. Chapter 1. The Geometry of Worship. We often mistake intensity for intimacy. We believe that the harder we stare and the higher we elevate someone, the closer we become to them. But if we strip away the emotion and look strictly at the structure of this dynamic, we find a geometry that makes connection impossible. Visualize the shape of your interaction. When you place someone on a pedestal, you are creating a vertical line. You are at the bottom, anchored by your insecurities and your perceived lack of value. They are at the top, bathed in the light of your projection. You have to crane your neck just to see the soles of their feet. This is the ache we spoke of in the previous chapter. It is the physical and psychological strain of looking up. The problem with this vertical arrangement is that it distorts the human standing on top of the platform. From your vantage point down below, you cannot see them clearly. You lose the details that make a person real. You do not see the cracks in their armor or the hesitation in their eyes. You do not see their flaws or their mundane habits. Distance acts like a filter that smooths out the rough edges of humanity until the person becomes a statue. A statue is beautiful. It is polished and perfect and imposing. But a statue is also cold. You cannot have a conversation with a statue, and you certainly cannot hold a relationship with one. By elevating this person, you have inadvertently dehumanized them. You have stripped them of the right to be average. You have stripped them of the right to make mistakes. In your quest to admire them, you have turned them into an object to be viewed, rather than a subject to be understood. Consider the physics of this position. If you are looking up, they must look down. A person looking down at you does not see a peer. They see a fan. They see a follower. They might feel pity, or they might feel an ego boost, but they will not feel the spark of mutual recognition that creates true attraction. Intimacy requires a horizontal plane. It requires two people standing on the same level of ground, looking each other in the eye. The pedestal creates a safety gap. It is actually a defense mechanism. As long as they are up there and you are down here, you never have to risk the vulnerability of being their equal. If they are perfect, then rejection is inevitable, and you can justify your pain. If they are gods among men, then you are absolved of the responsibility to challenge them, or to be yourself fully. It is a comfortable misery. To fix this, you must engage in a process of psychological demolition. You must take a sledgehammer to the pedestal.
This does not mean you drag the person through the mud or degrade them. It means you ground them. You must force your mind to acknowledge the gravity that holds them to the earth, just as it holds you. Start by visualizing the mundane. Imagine this person doing the things that ordinary human beings do. Visualize them brushing their teeth. Visualize them searching for their keys. Visualize them feeling awkward in a social situation or waking up with a bad hair day. These are not insults. These are evidences of humanity. Every time you inject a dose of reality into your perception, you lower the pedestal a few inches. You must stop interpreting their silence as mystery and their distance as superiority. Often what you perceive as a mysterious allure is simply their own insecurity or lack of interest. When you stop projecting a fantasy onto them, the vertical line begins to tilt. It flattens out. The marble statue cracks, and warm, living skin is revealed underneath. When you finally bring them down to eye level, the dynamic shifts instantly. You are no longer craning your neck. You are standing tall. The tension in your posture dissolves. Now you are face to face. In this space, there is no worship. There is only observation. You see them for who they actually are, rather than who you needed them to be. This is where the magic of reality happens, not in the sky, but on the ground. When you look someone in the eye without fear and without adoration, you challenge them to meet you there. You become accessible. You become a challenge rather than a conquest. The geometry of worship collapses, and the geometry of connection takes its place. We will continue to dismantle these psychological structures in the following chapters. If you wish to follow this progression and ensure you do not miss the next analysis, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel now. Chapter 2: Smooth Stone and False Perfection. You are standing at the base of the pillar again. Your neck is still craned back in that familiar and painful posture. High above you stands the object of your affection. In this specific light, and from this extreme vertical distance, they look immaculate. This is the primary optical illusion of the pedestal. It functions exactly like a soft focus lens in a camera. The distance blurs the lines. It hides the pores. It washes away the intricate and messy texture of being a human being. When you place someone 10 feet above your head, the sheer gap acts as a filter. You do not see a person anymore. You see an ideal. You see smooth stone. This creates a psychological environment of false perfection. There is a tragedy in this view that most people fail to recognize until it is too late. You might think you are honoring this person by elevating them. You might believe that raising them up to the sky is an act of profound respect or romantic love. But what you are actually doing is stripping them of their humanity. Marble statues do not have bad days. They do not have morning breath, or crippling insecurities, or irrational fears. They are cold and hard and terribly lonely. By polishing them into absolute perfection, you have made them unreachable. Think about the physics of a smooth surface. It offers no purchase. There is nothing to grab onto. This is the problem with the pedestal effect. It creates a dynamic where connection is physically impossible. If they are the statue, then you are the pilgrim. You are the tourist staring at the monument from behind a velvet rope. You cannot be yourself because you are too busy being an audience member. You watch your words carefully. You rehearse your actions in your head before you make them. You are terrified of making a mistake because you believe that a flawed human cannot possibly interact with a perfect icon. You trap yourself in a performance. You are not connecting. You are worshiping. And as we established in the previous chapter, worship requires distance to function.
This distance is a safety mechanism for you as well. It protects you from the reality of the other person. As long as they remain up there, you never have to deal with their complexity.
You never have to tolerate their bad moods or their annoying habits. You get to keep the fantasy of them, which is always safer and cleaner than the reality of them. But this safety comes at the cost of intimacy. You cannot touch something that is out of reach. Real intimacy is gritty. It has friction. Think about the people you are actually closest to in your life. Think of your best friend, or a sibling, or a partner you have known for years. You do not see them as smooth stone. You know exactly where their cracks are. You know what makes them angry and what makes them laugh, and the specific way they chew their food. You know their texture. That texture provides the grip necessary for human connection. You cannot hold on to a polished sphere because it slips right out of your hands. You need the rough edges. You need the flaws to hold on tight. The solution requires a fundamental shift in geometry. You must dismantle the vertical hierarchy. Taking them off the pedestal is not an act of disrespect. It is an act of mercy. It allows them to step down and breathe. It relieves them of the crushing burden of being your fantasy. When you stop looking up, you start looking at. The geometry changes. You are no longer on the vertical axis of hierarchy. You are on the horizontal axis of equality. Imagine the pillar sinking into the ground. The marble figure descends, lower and lower, until their eyes align perfectly with yours. Suddenly, the light changes. You see the fatigue in their face. You see the hesitation. You see the human being who is just as uncertain about life as you are. The smoothness vanishes. The false perfection dissolves. What remains is something far more valuable. A person. A reachable and tangible person. This is the only place where a relationship can survive. Up there on the pedestal, they are a concept. Down here on the ground, they are a reality. You have to decide what you want. Do you want a pristine image to admire from afar? Or do you want a living, breathing human to walk beside? You cannot have both. To hold their hand, you must first let go of the myth. You must shatter the smooth stone to find the warm skin underneath. Eye level is the only place where hands can touch. Chapter 3. The Architect of Distance. You stand back and look at the structure you have built. It is magnificent. It is gleaming white marble, towering over the landscape of your daily life.
The figure at the top creates a silhouette against the sun and casts a long shadow that covers you completely. This is the monument you constructed to the person you admire. It is beautiful, but there is a structural flaw that threatens the entire foundation of your connection. You cannot hold hands with a statue that stands 50 feet in the air. In the previous chapter, we examined how we smooth over the rough edges of another human being to create a false sense of perfection. We discussed the stone. Now we must discuss the elevation. This brings us to the role you have unknowingly played since the moment you became infatuated. You are the architect of distance. We often believe that emotional distance is caused by coldness or lack of interest. We think distance is horizontal,
like a widening canyon between two people standing on opposite cliffs. But there is another kind of distance that is far more deceptive because it feels like adoration. This is vertical distance. It is the calculated decision to elevate one person so high above the ground that they become untouchable. The problem is not with the person you admire. They are likely just a normal human being walking through life with their own insecurities and habits and average days. They did not ask for a pedestal.
They did not request to be placed on a platform where the air is thin and the expectations are crushing. You placed them there. You drafted the blueprints. You laid the brickwork of unearned praise, and you cemented it with your own feelings of unworthiness. When you look up at someone, you force yourself to look down on yourself.
The geometry is ruthless. For one end of the seesaw to rise, the other must sink. By assigning them a status of superior functioning or flawless character, you are implicitly assigning yourself the role of the flawed subordinate. You create a gap that intimacy cannot cross. Think about the physical sensation we discussed in the first chapter, the ache in the neck. That strain comes from a permanent posture of looking up. It is exhausting to constantly view someone through the lens of reverence rather than the lens of reality. But consider the view from up there. Being on a pedestal is a lonely experience. It is isolating. When you are trapped in someone else's idea of perfection, you cannot afford to be human. You cannot make a mistake. You cannot have a bad day. If the person on the pedestal stumbles, the person on the ground feels betrayed. This architecture protects you from risk. If they are up there and you are down here, you never have to face the terrifying equality of a real relationship. You do not have to be vulnerable if you are merely a fan in the audience of their life. It is a safety mechanism. It keeps the object of your desire safely out of reach, where they cannot hurt you with their mundane reality. To fix this, you do not need to tear them down. Dismantling the pedestal is not about devaluation. It is not about looking for dirt or trying to find reasons to despise them just to level the playing field. That is a reactionary tactic that only leads to resentment. The goal is not to drag them into the mud. The goal is to bring them back to eye level. You must begin the renovation project of your own perception. Start by noticing when you apologize for taking up space. Notice when you assume their time is more valuable than yours. These are the bricks of the pedestal. You remove them one by one. You remind yourself that their nervous system processes fear just like yours does. You remind yourself that they have to brush their teeth and pay their taxes and deal with the common frustrations of existence. Every time you acknowledge a flaw in them without judgment, you lower the platform. Every time you assert your own needs without guilt, you raise the ground you stand on. Slowly, the vertical distance collapses. The monument shrinks until it is gone entirely. What is left is not a god or an idol or a savior. What is left is a person standing directly in front of you. They are not looking down at you, and you are not craning your neck to see them. You are looking them in the eye. The air is clear. The shadow is gone. And for the first time since you started building, you are close enough to actually reach out and connect. This is where real life begins. It begins on the ground floor. Chapter 4. The Paralysis of the Small. When you stand at the base of a skyscraper and look up, the building seems to converge into a single point in the sky. It dominates your field of vision. It feels permanent, massive, and immovable. You, in comparison, feel fleeting and fragile. This is a trick of perspective. It is a visual distortion caused by your position relative to the object. We do the exact same thing to people. We have spent the last few chapters discussing the structure of distance and the geometry of worship. Now we arrive at the consequence of that geometry. When you construct a pedestal and place another human being upon it, you do not just elevate them. You automatically shrink yourself. This is the paralysis of the small. Imagine the physical sensation of interacting with someone you have placed on this mental structure.
You walk into the room and your throat tightens. Your movements become stiff. You rehearse your sentences before you speak them, terrified that a misplaced word might shatter the illusion of connection. You are no longer navigating a social interaction. You are performing a high-wire act where the cost of falling feels fatal. This happens because you have distorted the scale. In your mind,
They occupy a vast vertical space. They are the monument. You are the tourist standing in the shadow, afraid to touch the exhibit. The tragedy of this dynamic is that connection is impossible across a vertical gap. Intimacy requires a horizontal plane. It requires eye contact, not neck craning. As long as you are looking up, you cannot see them clearly. You only see the bottom of their shoes or the distorted angle of their chin. You do not see a person. You see a projection of your own insecurities cast against a towering figure. This creates a state of behavioral paralysis. When you feel small, you lose your agency. You wait for them to lead. You wait for them to choose the topic, to choose the venue, to choose the tone. You hand over the controls of the interaction because you believe that someone of such great height must know better than you. You become a passenger in your own life. This is not respect. Respect acknowledges value. The pedestal effect creates a caricature. It strips the other person of their humanity by removing their flaws. A person on a pedestal is not allowed to be boring or tired or irrational or average. They must be perfect because you have built them a stage that demands perfection. So how do we dismantle this architecture? How do we cure the paralysis? We do not tear them down. Tearing someone down is just another form of obsession. Instead, we must raise the floor. We must realize that the pedestal is not made of marble. It is made of cardboard. It is a box we constructed with our own imagination. And we can kick it away with a single thought. The quickest way to dismantle the pedestal is to focus on the biological reality of the human being. Monuments do not get the flu. Monuments do not have awkward moments in the grocery store. Monuments do not have insecurities about their hairline or their finances. But the person you are looking up to has all of these things. Visualize them doing something utterly mundane. Imagine them waiting in line at the Department of Motor Vehicles. Imagine them tripping over a rug. Imagine them forgetting someone's name at a party. These are not insults. They are anchors. They ground the person back into reality. They drag the statue down from the clouds and place it firmly on the earth where you are standing. When you acknowledge their ordinary nature, the vertical distance collapses. The skyscraper becomes a house. The giant becomes a neighbor. Suddenly, the paralysis lifts. If they are just a person, then you are allowed to be just a person too. You are allowed to stutter. You are allowed to disagree. You are allowed to be unpolished. The stakes vanish. The silence that once felt heavy becomes comfortable. The need to impress them is replaced by a curiosity to know them. You are no longer a small figure trembling in the shadow of a colossus. You are two people standing on the same level ground, looking each other in the eye. This is the only place where real interaction happens. Not down here, in the paralysis of the small, but up there, at eye level. It is time to stand up straight. It is time to stop building monuments to people who are just as fragile, just as temporary, and just as human as you are. Chapter 5. The Isolation of Altitude. We have arrived at the inevitable consequence of your architecture. Chapter 6 is where we realize that the structure you built has a cost.
That cost is isolation. When you elevate a person above the human plane, you do not just make them tall, you make them remote. This is the isolation of altitude. Imagine the physical reality of the dynamic you have created. You are standing on the dusty ground. The person you admire is standing on a pillar of white marble that soars 100 feet into the air. You tilt your head back to see them. You strain your eyes against the glare of the sun. From down here, they look magnificent. Their silhouette is sharp and clean. They look flawless because you are too far away to see the cracks.
You cannot see the hesitation in their hands or the fatigue in their eyes. Distance acts as a filter. It smooths out the rough edges of humanity until all that remains is a shape, a symbol. But consider the view from up there. Consider what you have done to them by placing them on this narrow platform. Up there, the air is thin. It is cold. Worst of all, it is lonely. A person placed on a pedestal has nowhere to move. If they take a step to the left or the right, they fall. If they relax their posture, they disappoint the audience below. They are trapped in a state of rigid performance. They must remain the statue you believe them to be. They cannot come down to hold your hand because the architecture you designed does not have a staircase. It only has a sheer drop. This creates a vacuum between you. Intimacy requires proximity. Connection requires that two people occupy the same space and breathe the same air. But you have engineered a gap that no voice can bridge without shouting. You cannot whisper sweet nothings to someone towering above you. You cannot share a quiet joke with a giant. The geometry creates a silence that eventually swallows the relationship. This is why the crush or the hero often feels so cold or unresponsive. It is not necessarily arrogance on their part. It is vertigo. They are looking down at you from a dizzying height. You look small to them, not because you are insignificant, but because you placed yourself so far away. You are a speck on the ground. The tragedy of the pedestal is that it dehumanizes everyone involved. It turns you into a fan, and it turns them into an idol. Neither of these are real people.
A fan is passive, and an idol is frozen. To break this isolation, you must be willing to do the one thing that feels most dangerous. You must bring them down. There is a fear in doing this. You worry that if you bring them down to eye level, you will lose the magic. You worry that if you see them up close, the perfection will dissolve. And you are right, it will. That is the point. When you dismantle the pedestal, the person hits the ground with a thud. The dust settles, and suddenly you are standing face to face. At this range, you see things you ignored before. You see that their skin has texture. You see that they have nervous habits. You realize they can be petty or insecure or boring. They are no longer a smooth stone. They are flesh and blood and complexity. This realization does not destroy the connection.
It creates the conditions for it to actually begin. You cannot love a fantasy. You can only love a human being. And human beings live on the ground. They live at eye level. Eye level is where empathy lives. It is the only altitude where you can look someone in the eyes without straining your neck. It is the only place where you can see yourself in them. When they are no longer looming over you, the power dynamic shifts. You are no longer the supplicant begging for attention. You are an equal partner engaging in an exchange. The paralysis we spoke of in the last chapter dissolves here. When you are no longer overwhelmed by their immense height, you regain the ability to move. You can walk away if you need to. You can step closer if you want to.
You have agency again. So the task for this phase of your journey is demolition. You must take a sledgehammer to the marble column. You must stop protecting their image and start seeking their reality. Do not be afraid of their flaws. Their flaws are the handholds that allow you to climb close enough to touch them. Their imperfections are the cracks where the light gets in. We leave the isolation of altitude behind us now. We descend from the dizzying heights of infatuation to the solid ground of reality. It is less glamorous down here. It is messier, but it is warm and it is real, and it is the only place where you can truly meet another person. Chapter 6. The Tremble in the Hand. You have spent the last few chapters building a monument. You laid the foundation with your focused attention, and you raised the walls with your admiration.
Now the person you desire sits at the very pinnacle of a structure entirely of your own making. They are miles above the ground. You are standing in the dirt, looking up. The ache in the neck we spoke of in the beginning has become a permanent posture. But now comes the moment of interaction. You decide to reach out. You decide to send the text or make the call or walk across the room to say hello. And this is when you notice it. The subtle vibration in your fingers, the tremble in the hand. This tremor is not a sign of love. We often mistake anxiety for passion. We feel our heart rate spike and our palms sweat, and we tell ourselves, this is romance. It is not romance. It is the biological response to a threat. When you look up at someone on a pedestal, you have positioned yourself as the lesser creature. Your brain perceives a hierarchy where you are at the bottom. The tremble is your nervous system warning you that you are approaching something dangerous. You are reaching for a hot stove. You are walking toward a cliff edge. The danger is not physical harm, but the psychological devastation of rejection from a being you have deemed superior. Let us look at the geometry of this interaction again. When you look up, your eyes are wide and vulnerable. When they look down, their gaze is heavy and judgmental. This angle distorts reality. From below, a statue looks towering and flawless. You cannot see the cracks in the marble from the ground. You cannot see the dust gathering on their shoulders. Distance smooths out the rough edges of humanity. It turns a complex and flawed human being into a smooth stone icon. As long as they remain up there, you are interacting with a fantasy. You are not trembling because of who they are. You are trembling because of who you think they are. You treat the interaction like you are handling a museum artifact. You are terrified that if you make the wrong move or say the wrong word, the glass will shatter. You polish your sentences until they lose all their character. You suppress your natural humor because you fear it might seem foolish to someone so elevated. You edit your personality down to zero. This is the paralysis caused by the height. You are so afraid of falling from their favor that you never actually climb up to meet them. To stop the hand from shaking, you must dismantle the tower. You cannot simply tell yourself to be confident. Confidence is a byproduct of reality. The reality is that gravity affects them just as it affects you. We must perform an act of psychological demolition. We need to lower the platform until their eyes meet yours on a straight, horizontal line. This requires a shift in focus. You must stop looking at the polished exterior and start looking for the seams in the costume. Picture them in a moment of utter banality. Imagine them searching for their keys when they are late for work. Imagine them waking up with a headache and messy hair. Imagine them feeling awkward at a party where they know no one. These are not insults. These are anchors. They tether the floating idol back to the earth. When you humanize them,
you strip away the aura of invincibility. You realize that their hands shake too. Perhaps not when they look at you, but when they look at their own obstacles.
They have fears, and they have doubts. They have moments of crushing insecurity, just like you do. When you see this, the pedestal collapses. The marble turns back into warm flesh. The moment they hit the ground, the dynamic changes. The air pressure equalizes. You are no longer shouting up into the clouds, hoping for a response. You are speaking across a table. The tremble in your hand ceases because the threat is gone. There is no predator. There is no judge. There is only another person trying to navigate the same confusing world. The silence between you is no longer a vacuum of space. It is just a pause in conversation. You reach out now. Your hand is steady. You are not begging for scraps from a high table. You are offering a connection. You are not holding onto the ledge of a cliff. You are standing on solid ground. And for the first time since you started building this monument, you can actually see the color of their eyes. They are not looking down at you. They are looking at you. And that makes all the difference.
Chapter 7. Retrieving the Gold. The sun has finally begun to set on the landscape of your admiration. You have spent 7 chapters standing at the foot of a monument. You have studied the geometry of the pedestal and felt the ache in your neck. You have analyzed the smooth stone of false perfection and measured the vast distance that altitude creates. You have felt the paralysis of being small and the isolation of being far away. Finally, you looked down at your own hands and saw the tremble there. Now we arrive at the turning point. This is where the story shifts from observation to action. It is time to retrieve the gold.
To understand this task, you must first understand a strange truth about the human mind. When we build these towering statues of other people, we do not build them out of thin air. We do not quarry the stone from the ground. The material comes from somewhere else entirely. It comes from inside of you. Psychologists have long understood that we project our own qualities onto others. Usually, we speak of projecting our darkness or our fears. We assume someone is angry because we are suppressing our own rage. But there is another side to this mechanism. We also project our light. We project our gold. Think of the person you have placed on that pedestal. Think of the specific qualities that make them seem so towering. Perhaps it is their unshakable confidence. Perhaps it is their sharp wit or their creative brilliance. Maybe it is a sense of calm that seems to weather every storm. You look at them and you see a concentration of value that seems superhuman. You assume that they possess all of this gold and you possess none of it. That is the illusion. You can only recognize qualities that you already possess. You would not know what confidence looked like if you did not have the seed of it within your own psychology. You would not resonate with their brilliance if your own mind did not contain a matching frequency. We tend to give our best qualities away to others because we are afraid to claim them for ourselves. It feels safer to admire the gold in someone else than to undertake the heavy responsibility of refining it in your own life. So you take your own potential, your own intelligence, and your own strength, and you cast it in bronze. You shape it into the form of another person. You lift it high above your head and place it on the shelf. Then you step back and fall to your knees in awe of something that was yours to begin with. Retrieving the gold means climbing up there and taking it back. This is not an act of theft. It is an act of repatriation. It is not an act of aggression against them. In fact, it is the kindest thing you can do for them. Being a statue is a lonely existence. It is cold and it is rigid.
When you hold all the gold, you force the other person to carry the weight of your unlived potential. They have to be perfect because you are refusing to be competent. They have to be the savior because you are refusing to save yourself. This creates a terrible pressure.
Eventually, the person on the pedestal will resent you for the burden, or they will fall off and crush you with their inevitable humanity. So how do you retrieve the gold? You start by identifying the specific trait you admire most. Name it. Is it their courage? Is it their discipline? Once you name it, you must admit that this quality belongs to the human species and not to that one specific individual. It is a shared resource. Next, you must stop watching them display the quality and start enacting it yourself. If you admire their voice, speak up. If you admire their fitness, move your body. Every time you act out the trait you admire, you are chipping a piece of gold off their statue and putting it into your own pocket. Day by day, the statue changes. As you reclaim your own value, the person on the pedestal begins to shrink. This is not a malicious shrinking. They do not become small or pathetic. They simply return to their natural human dimensions. The marble turns back into warm flesh. The smooth, impossible stone develops the pores and scars of reality. They come down from the clouds and their feet touch the earth. Suddenly, the geometry changes. You are no longer looking up. You are looking straight ahead. Your neck straightens. The ache subsides. The distance collapses. This is the great irony of the pedestal. We think we put people up there because we love them or because we want to be close to them. But altitude makes intimacy impossible. You cannot hold the hand of a god. You can only worship it. You cannot embrace a statue. You can only stand in its shadow. When you retrieve the gold, you are not just empowering yourself. You are liberating the other person. You are allowing them to be flawed and complex and ordinary. You are allowing them to make mistakes without shattering your world. You are finally ready to meet them at eye level. And eye level is the only place where true connection can survive. It is the only place where you can look someone in the face and see them not for what you need them to be, but for who they actually are. The trembling in your hand stops because you are no longer reaching for something out of your grasp. You are simply reaching out to shake hands with an equal. The gold was heavy to carry when it was over your head. It is much lighter when you carry it inside your chest. Chapter 8. The Mechanics of Leveling. We have arrived at the pivotal moment of our reconstruction. For 8 chapters, we have analyzed the architecture of the distance between you and the object of your admiration. We have felt the ache in the neck from looking up. We have mapped the geometry of worship and understood how isolation creates a vacuum of anxiety. We have even retrieved the gold you projected onto them, acknowledging that the value you see is often a reflection of your own potential. Now, we must pick up the tools. It is time to adjust the height of the platform. The most common error people make when realizing they have placed someone on a pedestal is to attempt an impossible jump. You feel small, so you try to leap up to their level. You try to perform. You try to impress. You contort your personality to reach the high shelf where you have placed them. This approach is doomed to fail. Every time you jump to reach them, you are subconsciously validating the height difference. You are proving to yourself that they are up there and you are down here. The mechanics of leveling require a different approach. You do not jump up. You bring them down. This is not an act of aggression. We are not tearing them down in a way that destroys their dignity or dismisses their genuine talents.
We are simply increasing the resolution of our vision until the illusion of perfection dissolves. Think about a smooth stone you might find on a beach. From 10 feet away, it looks like a flawless sphere. It gleams in the sunlight. It appears supernatural in its symmetry. But if you pick it up and hold it 3 inches from your eye, the reality asserts itself. You see the chips. You see the scratches. You see the uneven texture of the surface. The stone is still beautiful,
But it is no longer perfect. It is material. It is real. To dismantle the pedestal, you must zoom in. You must aggressively humanize the person you admire. This begins with a deliberate shift in focus toward the mundane. When we are enchanted by someone, our minds act like a highlight reel editor. We delete the footage of them stumbling over their words. We ignore the moments they look tired or petty. We filter out the boring reality of their daily existence. To level the field, you must stop editing. You must force yourself to visualize the biological and logistical reality of their life. Imagine them waiting in line at a government office, bored and frustrated. Imagine them struggling to open a jar of pickles. Imagine them having a bad hair day or dealing with a mild toothache. Imagine them feeling insecure about something trivial. This mental exercise is not about mockery. It is about grounding. It is about remembering that the person who seems to float above the ground is actually subject to gravity, just like you. They have to pay taxes. They get stuck in traffic. Their body requires sleep and maintenance. They have irrational fears. They have moments of crushing doubt. When you consistently remind yourself of these unglamorous truths, the geometry begins to shift. The statue starts to crack. The marble turns into flesh. This process can feel frightening. There is a part of us that wants the fantasy. We want the superhero. We want the infallible being because it feels safe to follow someone who knows the way. Taking them off the pedestal means accepting that they are just as lost and confused as you are. It means accepting that no one is coming to save you.
But look at what you gain. As the pedestal lowers, the distance closes. When they are 40 feet in the air, you cannot hear them. You cannot touch them. You certainly cannot connect with them. Connection requires proximity. When you finally bring them down to eye level, the ache in your neck disappears. Your chin drops. You are no longer looking up into the blinding sun of their perfection. You are looking across into the eyes of another human being. This is where the tremble in your hand stops. You are no longer holding an offering up to a deity. You are extending a hand to an equal. The mechanics of leveling are about restoring balance to the social ecosystem. No human being was designed to bear the weight of your worship. It is too heavy for them, and the posture of kneeling is too painful for you. By seeing their flaws, you grant them permission to be human. By accepting your own value, you grant yourself permission to stand tall. The visual metaphor changes now. You are not a spectator in the gallery looking at a monument. You are two travelers standing on the same map. The ground is solid. The air is breathable. And for the first time since this journey began, you are ready to speak not as a fan, but as a peer. You have spent the last 9 chapters dismantling a monument. You chipped away the marble. You lowered the scaffolding. You adjusted the terrain until the ground beneath your feet felt solid and equal. But all that work happened inside the quiet architecture of your own mind. It was internal renovation. Now comes the moment where the theory meets the air. Now you must open your mouth and speak. Chapter 9. The First Conversation. There is a specific tension that arises right before you engage with someone you have previously idolized. Even if you have intellectually accepted that they are merely human, the old instincts flare up. Your heart rate elevates. Your palms dampen. This is muscle memory. Your body remembers the posture of worship, even if your mind has rejected it. You are conditioned to tilt your head back to address them, and that physical tilt restricts your vocal cords. It makes your voice sound thin. It makes you sound like a supplicant asking for a favor rather than an equal initiating an exchange. The goal of the first conversation is not to impress. It is not to dazzle them with your wit or to prove that you belong on the same stage. The goal is simply to verify reality. You are testing the hypothesis that this person is just a person.
Think about how you speak to a cashier, or a neighbor, or an old friend. There is no rehearsal. You do not draft a script in your head 3 times before you say hello. You simply speak because you assume you have the right to be heard. The air belongs to you just as much as it belongs to them. But with the person on the pedestal, you hoard your words. You polish them until they lose their edge. You are so afraid of saying the wrong thing that you often say nothing at all, or you say something so rigid and manufactured that it creates the very distance you are trying to bridge. To break this, you must understand the visual geometry of the interaction. When you approach them, do not imagine you are walking up the steps to a throne. Imagine you are walking across a flat plane. You are approaching them at eye level.
This is a crucial visualization. If you project the image of them towering over you, then your eyes will naturally seek the floor. You will display the body language of submission. You will hunch your shoulders to make yourself smaller, because that is what prey does in the presence of a predator. But they are not a predator, and you are not prey. You are 2 travelers on the same road. Watch their eyes. This is the anchor. When someone is on a pedestal, you tend to look at their shoes, or you look at the aura of success you have painted around them. You look at the idea of them. Instead, lock on to the physical reality. Look at the color of their iris. Look at the small asymmetry in their blink. Look at the texture of the skin around their eyes. These are the details of biology. These details ground you.
They remind you that this is a biological organism, processing oxygen and converting energy just like you. The first sentence you speak should be banal. Do not try to be profound. Profundity is a heavy stone to carry, and you are likely to drop it. Ask a simple question. Make an observation about the immediate environment. Comment on the weather, or the coffee, or the time of day. This seems counterintuitive because you feel this person deserves high art. But high art creates separation. Banality creates connection. When you say something ordinary, you invite them to be ordinary too. You are giving them permission to step out of the role of the idol. You are signaling that you do not expect them to perform miracles. You just expect them to respond. Notice what happens when they answer. Their voice will not boom from the clouds. It will come from a throat. It might crack. They might stumble over a word. They might look away or fidget. Capture that data. Do not gloss over it. These are the cracks in the smooth stone we talked about in Chapter 3. These imperfections are the handholds where you can finally grip reality. You must also remember that they are trapped in their own perspective. While you are obsessing over your performance, they are likely thinking about their own schedule, or their own hunger, or their own insecurities. The spotlight you think is shining on you is actually a mirror shining back at them. They are not grading you. They are just navigating their day. If the conversation stalls, do not panic. Silence is not a verdict on your worth. It is just a pause in the rhythm. When you are looking up at a statue,
silence feels like judgment. When you are looking across at a human, silence is just a moment to breathe. It is the space between notes that makes the music possible. As you walk away from this first conversation, you will feel a shift. The ache in your neck from Chapter 1 will be gone because you did not have to look up. You looked straight ahead. The paralysis from Chapter 5 will have dissolved into motion. You moved. You spoke. You survived. The monument is gone. The dust has settled. All that remains is a person standing on the same earth as you. And now that you are on the same level, the real work of connection can finally begin. Chapter 10. Breathing the same air. You have spent a considerable amount of time straining your neck. That is the inevitable physical consequence of the pedestal. When you place another human being above you,
You force your own gaze upward, locking your posture into a permanent state of submission. The muscles in your neck tighten. Your balance is compromised. You cannot see where you are walking because your eyes are fixed on a point that is drifting further and further out of reach. This is not just a metaphor for respect. It is a precise description of the psychological vertigo that occurs when you isolate someone in the stratosphere of your own admiration. Now we arrive at the aftermath of the leveling. The marble giant has been dismantled. The staircase has been climbed. The golden veneer has been stripped away to reveal the common wood beneath. You are no longer standing at the base of a monument. You are standing on flat ground. And for the first time, you are looking straight ahead. This creates a sudden and jarring intimacy. When the vertical distance collapses, the horizontal reality rushes in to fill the void. You are now close enough to see the things that distance had mercifully hidden. This is the essence of breathing the same air. It is the realization that the atmosphere surrounding this person is not made of ambrosia or stardust. It is composed of the same nitrogen and oxygen that fills your own lungs. At this proximity, the details become undeniable. When you looked up from the bottom of the pedestal, the angle obscured the cracks. You saw a silhouette against the sun, a perfect outline with no flaws. But here, at eye level, the resolution sharpens. You see the hesitation in their hands. You hear the sharp intake of breath before they speak, betraying the same anxiety that lives in your own chest. You notice that their eyes do not glow with supernatural confidence. Instead, they dart around the room, scanning for approval, seeking safety, just as yours do. There is a profound relief in this discovery, though it often begins as disappointment. We secretly love the pedestal because it absolves us of responsibility. If they are up there, perfect and untouchable, then we are excused for being down here, flawed and incomplete. But once you share the same air, that excuse evaporates. You are forced to acknowledge that their achievements were not the result of magic or destiny. They were the result of choices, timing, and effort. And if they are just a person, comprised of the same biology and subject to the same laws of physics as you, then the gap between you is not insurmountable. It is merely a distance that can be walked. Breathing the same air means accepting the grittiness of reality. It means acknowledging that this person has to sleep, eat, and maintain their body. They have bad days where their temper is short. They have moments of confusion where they do not know the answer. When you idolize someone, you strip them of these mundane human traits, turning them into a two-dimensional character in a story you are writing. By bringing them down to eye level, you are actually granting them the dignity of being real. You are allowing them to be complex, contradictory, and alive. The pedestal creates isolation. It is lonely at the top,
but it is also lonely at the bottom. The worshipper cannot truly connect with the idol because connection requires a bridge, not a ladder. As long as you are looking up, you are projecting an image onto a screen. You are interacting with a fantasy. Real connection, the kind that fosters genuine relationships and mutual respect, can only happen on the horizontal plane. It requires the exchange of signals between equals. Consider the physics of sound. When you shout up at someone on a high ledge, your voice is lost to the wind. They can barely hear you, and you can barely hear them. The conversation is impossible. But when you stand face to face, the acoustics change. You can speak in a normal volume. You can hear the nuance in their tone. You can detect the sarcasm, the warmth, or the fear. This is what it means to humanize the interaction. You stop broadcasting your admiration and start engaging in a dialogue. The fear you felt before was the fear of the unknown. The giant seemed dangerous because they were unpredictable and powerful.
But the person standing in front of you is governed by the same needs that govern you. They seek pleasure and avoid pain. They want to be understood. They fear rejection. Once you understand that their internal machinery operates on the same logic as yours, the intimidation vanishes. You are no longer a spectator watching a performance. You are a participant in the same reality. So take a breath. Notice that the air around them is not charged with electricity. It is not vibrating with mystic power. It is just air. They are breathing it in, processing it to keep their heart beating, and breathing it out. You are doing exactly the same thing. In this shared biological rhythm, the hierarchy dissolves. There is no above. There is no below. There is only the space between you, and for the first time, it is small enough to cross with a handshake. Walking among equals. We arrive at last at the final shift in perspective. You spent years craning your neck upward until the strain felt normal. That vertical distance defined your relationship. You believed that looking up was a sign of respect, but in reality, it was an act of separation. The statue you built in your mind has finally come down. The marble has softened into skin, and the cold perfection has warmed into human error. You are now standing on the exact same floor as the person you once idolized. There is no more vertigo, and there is no more awe. There is only clarity. You see them clearly for the first time because you are finally looking them in the eye. Connection cannot survive across a vertical gap. It requires the level ground of mutual humanity. You did not need to become a giant to meet them. You only needed to accept your own standing. Walk forward now, with your head held high and your gaze steady. You are no longer an observer living in a shadow. You are walking among equals.